Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. This week we are coming to you from summer camp that we are helping out with in Talladega, Alabama. And what I want to do from this video is talk to you guys about the Presonus 64S. Presonus was nice enough to let us try one out, and I just wanted to kind of talk through our first impressions of how the board is going. So there's a lot to like, and there are a few things that I don't love, a few glitches that I've experienced. So I want to talk about what's going on here. First of all, those lights are not actually flickering. That's just apparently the way the camera picks up the board. So let's start with things that I like and like how my workflow works on here. My workflow has gotten really quick because I am doing a couple different things here. Number one, when you first turn the board on, if you can tell on here, it's set to input level or layer, and so that's just showing us 32 inputs all the way across the board, and then if you hit the next button, you've got up to 64, and you can just keep on going. This board has 64 inputs on it, and then also more if you count in some of the quarter-inch inputs and that kind of thing on the back of the board. So for me, to get around fast, what I am doing is instead of being on the input page, I am on the user page, and these are basically the individual channels that I need to get a hold of that are important for transitions and just different things happening in the service. So I like to have my vocal mics where I can ride them all the time without having to do anything different. So we've got vocals 1 and 2, which is all we have this week. Acoustic 1, which is again all we need this week. We do not have a keyboardist for this particular camp, so we are running a tracks rig, and our drummer is playing some transitionary pads between each song. And I need to be able to turn those up and down as necessary. Now you'll notice that there's a left-hand symbol on there. This is a stereo pair, but I only need the left channel on this user layer so that I can still have control over both, but it saves me one more space to work with. And then the bass, which you'll see later, is a part of a couple different groups, but the bass is actually just one channel. So I don't really need a DCA group for it specifically, but I do want to be able to grab its volume from time to time. And so I got plenty of channels on here to work with, so I threw it on the surface. We skip over one fader, and then we've got our pastor mics. So we've got our MC1, MC2. Those are our handhelds. And then we've got our headset mic. Skip over a little bit more. And we had 3 of these, but we ended up only actually needing 1. But this is our auxiliary input. So these are the quarter-inch inputs on the back of the board. This tablet up here is playing background music between services, and so that's coming in right there. That is, again, a stereo channel, but it's coming in literally as stereo, not 2 separate channels, so that's what's going on with that. And you can see that line means that it's spread out stereo. You can actually change the width of it too, which is kind of cool. Over here, we have our MD, which is our music director, and then our Talkback, which is my Talkback microphone. And the reason why I have those on the surface is because I like to, in these camps, when things change at the last minute, I like to be able to hit solo on the music director and be able to hear what is happening with transitions, or if maybe he needs to get a hold of me to talk about how we're going to end the service. That's really helpful. Talkback. When we first do rehearsal, or if I have to make an announcement or something, I like to have the ability to put the Talkback microphone in the main mix, but I have to make sure that I turn it back off afterwards. So that's why I like to have the fader available so I can grab it and see it if it's up or down. Finally over here, these are some of our effects, sends and returns. These are our returns, and these are our sends for the vocal effects. I like to have control over my sends sometimes for ramping effects. On this board, the access to the effects is not as good as I would like it to be. So that's why I'm eating up some of my user faders here to do that. It's not a big deal. Functionally, I'm used to it now, but that's why I have these here, just for figuring out how my levels are going to work. All right, so over to our DCA section. There we go. All right, so my first DCA is drums and bass, and then we have electric guitars, keys and tracks, the full band. Sorry about that reflection. There we go. Keys and band, keys and tracks, and then number 4 is all band. 5 is all of our vocals, which just happens to be 2 this week, plus some track stuff. Then we've got our vocal verb, our delay, and our MC microphones. Now, the vocal verb and delay, that's something I like to have control over. One thing that's annoying on these DCAs is that I would prefer it if I could have those control the effect send, but on this board, currently you can only control the effect return. Not a big deal, but it's just not the way I like to do it. And then the MCs are over there. Again, they have their own individual channels, but part of the reason I did that is because I can use them with my filter groups. So filter groups, or DCA spill, is really nice, especially when you have, a fairly dense mix like this. It's really only about 30 channels of band, but right now I see my user layer with all my channels we just talked about. But if I go over to, say, the drums and I hit select, then all my faders spill out to show what is in that drum group. So of course I got my drums, and then I also have my bass, and then some of my track lines like percussion left and right, and then that actually should not be in there. That's my track guitar. And it's pretty easy to affect what's in there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with one hand, but if I hold down the select button, and let's actually go to our inputs page before I do this. They will flash with whatever can be put in there, and they'll hold solid for what is controlled by that group. So if I wanted to, say, take out that guitar line, which is flashing right now, or solid right now, I'm going to click it, and now you can see it is flashing, and now you can see it is no longer in that group, which is pretty cool. So it makes it really easy. I can click select again to get out of that, and now I'm back in my user fader group. And so I basically survive, now I'm back in my user group. I can basically survive by just, having most of my individual controls with my user faders, and then as I need to adjust individual items from my DCAs, then I can just hit select, and then they will spill out onto the mixer as needed. And I'm really sorry this video is probably super choppy. I'm trying to stay close to the microphone because the air conditioning is really loud in this room. So that's pretty great. Another workflow thing that I did, I'm going to talk more about this in the next video, but up here we have, let me select a channel. We have some knobs that are preset to this input button, which is like your generic thing. So over on the far right, we've got high pass, we've got EQ, gain, frequency, and Q. And you can see they're physically labeled with that as well as digital label. And down here we have buttons to select what EQ band we're working on at the time. We also have our thresholds for gate and compression, pan, and of course our preamp gain. So I really like that. I like that it's got physical labels on it. I like that it's consistent. One thing that's annoying though is that when you first turn the board on, this input button, you'll notice it says hold to lock. That is not set, so it's not going to do it right now because I turned this off, but before, if I'd hit gate, the input button would turn off, and then all the buttons up here would change to show the settings for the gate. In some ways this is good, but then that means that if I'm used to grabbing, say, this far right knob to control the Q of an EQ, but I'm happen to be looking at the gate screen, then the knobs would say something different and it can get confusing. So one thing that's really helpful, and I wish this was built into the scenes instead of built into something you have to redo every time you reset the board, but by holding down that input button and hitting hold to lock, it's doing what we're seeing right now, where no matter what mode I'm in, these knobs are lined up with their physical labels. And so for consistency, that's way better. And then when I need to control something, say like the range of the gate, then I can just select range, and then this one knob here will control whatever I have selected. Which for me is great because I don't really need a dedicated knob for that. I'm just going to grab that every once in a while when I'm doing sound check. So those are most of the things that I like. Also, the app is really good. The band has been using the QMix app, and even though it has a really poor rating on the App Store right now, they didn't experience any issues like what was listed on there. So I need to go on and give some positive reviews to that. So they actually really liked it. It does take a moment to load at first because there's over 64 channels to mix, which is a little intimidating, but they're not having a problem with that. Let's talk about a few things that I don't like. I have experienced several glitches. One time the board froze. Luckily, it was during a setup time, so not even sound check. And I'm not quite sure what triggered it. I think it's something I was changing with the stage box, but I noticed I can no longer connect to the board through Wi-Fi. Came back, the board was non-responsive. I gave it a restart. Have not had that problem since, but it was a little bit concerning. My biggest thing that annoys me functionally on this board during an actual service is the monitor control over here. So this is for hitting solo. There are 3 main types, I'm really sorry about this glare, of monitor control. Latch mode, which is like what a lot of boards do, where you can select multiple things to solo at a time. Radio mode, where you pick one thing, and if you select another solo, it automatically clears out the last one. Now, on either one of those, when you do not have something soloed, your headphones don't put anything out. Control mode fixes that issue, where when you select a channel, when you deselect your solo, or clear it out, you're going to hear the main mix coming through. But a couple issues with that. One, when you do that, you don't have the option to do radio mode. It only does latch mode. 2, if you are listening to the main mix because you've got nothing soloed, if you have a filter or EQ on your main mix to make up for things in the room, that will affect what's coming out of your headphones as well, which is annoying. You could normally fix that by sending your main left-right mix to a pair of matrices, but there's a glitch in this board where the stereo mix of your main left-right being sent to a stereo matrix results in a mono output, which again is just another glitch that needs to be fixed on there. But my biggest issue overall is that over here we have an option for PFL, pre-fade listen, that picks and chooses when it does and does not work. And I've tried it in all 3 of the modes. I tried it just a few minutes ago, and some things would work. That button would actually have an effect. It seems like inputs that are coming from the board. No, actually, that doesn't even make sense. Some things would work PFL. Some things would only work AFL, no matter what I did. And that was really frustrating for me because there were a couple times when I wanted to listen to my MD, and I've got his fader down so that he's not coming through the house, but while the fader is down, the solo effectively would not work. So the only way for me to listen to that would be to go select this channel and then take him out of my main mix, so there's not even a possibility, and then push the fader up and then hit solo. And there's just, for workflow reasons, I don't like that. I found that really kind of frustrating. So again, that's something that hopefully just a firmware fix can do. But that was really frustrating to me to have control room, again, not allow, some boards call it last queue. This board calls it radio mode. So monitor mode wouldn't let me do radio mode, and then PFL didn't work. So I'm not super happy about that, but it's not the end of the world. We made it through and it was fine. Another big glitch that we experienced, we have been recording, you can see right now I'm recording audio through the board onto Waves Tracks Live. Sorry, it's a messy setup up here. And when we did that, we were set to 48K, and we were only recording 30 channels. This laptop's recorded 30 channels consistently with no issues with other mixers. But with this one, I was running into all kinds of pops and clicks. I restarted the board. I changed a bunch of things on the computer. And again, same settings I use with other mixers, and couldn't get rid of that. Had to throw out the first night's worth of recordings. The fix for that was for me just to go to Home, System, and switch to 44.1. But I don't really want to do that. I mean, it's fine. I don't mind, sound is fine at 44.1. It's just kind of weird that it would work there, but not at 48. Now, we recorded with this board about 16 channels of drums the other night at 48 and didn't have any issues. But with this particular recording, with this particular computer, it did not like 48K and was effectively unusable. Let's talk about the effects. We'll talk more about this in the next video where I talk about how I set up my bass scene. But the effects on here are usable, but only after a lot of work. My biggest issue, Presonus, hopefully you're listening to this, is, here's one I haven't used yet. So I just opened up this reverb, first time using it, and it defaults to the digital XL reverb, which honestly I think it just doesn't sound great to begin with. And then here's what's so ridiculous, is that it starts you off with type van. So it's accurate. It sounds like you are playing acoustic guitar in a emptied out moving van, but why in the world would I want to use that live? It sounds horrible. It is not a good sounding reverb. So when it comes to getting moving quickly and having inspiring effects, this is as far from that as you can get. It's a really, really bad sounding reverb. Now that said, you can go through and you can change the type. You might need to play with definitely some of the settings in here. You might need to also EQ the reverb to get it where you want. This is the worst sounding reverb on here. And again, it's the default. For vocals, I'm using this digital reverb, and it's on the rock snare hall setting with some different reflection time options. And I think I'm EQing it a little bit, and that sounds pretty decent. So that first reverb is horrible. Presonus, you should change it to where when you open a reverb for the first time, that it starts with maybe this reverb and with a preset that's actually usable. I'm sorry, I'm trying to move this camera so that the glare's not there. But that other reverb is horrible. This one sounds a lot better with a setting like this. Same thing with the delay. So here's the delay I'm using. This is a stereo delay. And but what's ironic is when you first open it, these two time options are both set to 2 milliseconds. So obviously you're gonna need to set up a tap tempo. So if I tap in the tempo, notice that they stay at the same time. There's no option on this delay to allow for a time differential, a musical time differential between the two delays. And so right now, if you were to use this, it'd be effectively a mono delay. So the cool thing is, and again, this is stupid that this is the default, but the cool thing is that when you set a difference in time, it will keep that relative distance when you do tap again. So what I did was I went to time A, And for just simple big numbers, I went to 2 seconds. And what I want to do is set up a quarter note on the left and a dotted eighth note on the right. So a dotted eighth note is effectively 0.75 times whatever your quarter note is, which is, in this number, is really easy numbers. It's half plus another half of that half. So it's 1.5 seconds. So I just took this knob, 1.5. Cool. And now if I tap again, so you see we've got these 2 different times. And if you took 612 and multiplied it by 0.75, you would get at or very close 458. So it does keep that in there for you. But here's another dumb thing, Presonus. The spread effect of that is set to 0 when you first bring up the delay. So even if we did all this, you would still have both your delays coming down the center. It's not until you start turning the spread up that you start to get actual separation between the 2 delays. So at 100%, the delay A is in your hard left, B is in your hard right. So I'm kind of meeting in the middle at 75%. But it's just annoying that I'd have to go through that much work to get an initialized preset that actually sounds decent. And once I did, it was fine. And then I played with some EQ and played with the filters. I don't mind if those flatten out when you pull up the delay for the first time. But that's just one thing that, like, the goal of live sound is to move fast and to have things that sound good right at your fingertips. And this board has the capacity for that. And just with a simple firmware update, they could make those things work faster. Or for me, this is something that I would build into my bass scene. So if I use this board again in the near future, I won't have to do all this work again. I can just pull it up and go. So it's definitely usable. I think that if you are someone who mixes a lot on other consoles, you're going to find it a little finicky at first because certain things are not where you'd expect them to be. It didn't take me long. I got really into this board and stayed up all night for basically 2 days straight. And now I feel like I'm really comfortable with 90% of the board. And I do like it. I've enjoyed mixing on it at this camp. I think it sounds good, which is obviously incredibly important. And once you get these workflow things figured out, especially with the DCA spill and the user groups, well, it's really quick to move around, even with a lot of channels. So if you have a lot of channels, like this camp band's not huge, but if you have a bigger band or you're doing orchestral stuff or something to that effect, this is a great board for, like, the money is incredibly cheap to be able to have this much stuff at your fingertips. Even effects, because we have 8 effects. Once you get them set the way you like, we can do things like have, a reverb that's specific to what the band hears in their ears. This week we set the bass player has 2 channels. He's got one that is EQ'd for front of house and one that has its own EQ for his ears, just to give him some options. So it's a killer board. It's like, I'd say 80% of the way there. If they can fix these things with the firmware updates, particularly with the recording, the solo thing needs to be figured out, and some better presets on these effects, I think it could be like a real killer board and could definitely be the next thing that churches are looking for if they need more than 32 inputs on stage and they want to have a ton of stereo in-ear packs. This thing's awesome. It's a really, really good board. Hopefully those little issues will get fixed, and then I'll be able to give a even more ringing endorsement. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. By the way, this video is being shot on July 6, 2019. So if you're watching this in the future, this firmware is whatever version came out in March of 2019. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your take on the board. And I'd love to do a follow-up video. Hopefully Presonus will listen to some notes. I've got about 60 different notes I took, good and bad, that I'm going to send to them, and we'll see what happens in the future. So until next time, have a great week. Again, this is Chad from Ascension Worship. I hope this has been helpful for you and your team. Come back here every Tuesday for new information.